The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Well, greetings, family. Welcome to another episode of Walking Through the Language of the Heart, referring to the book of the same title, The Language of the Heart. Now, this features all of AA co-founder Bill W.'s writings in the Grapevine from 1944 to 1970. The book includes how Bill came to organize AA's 12 steps, his first thoughts about the program's 12 traditions, emotional and spiritual growth, and so much more. And on the phone with me right now is our co-host and friend, Mr. Chris S. Welcome, Chris, back to the show.
Monty, hey, how's everything going?
It is going well. It is very toasty here in Oregon, where it normally is, wet and rainy. It is definitely warm, and that's for sure. And so, listeners, if you're hearing a slight hum in the background, I'm not sure if you are, but if you are, that's our air conditioner. And we usually have it off when we're recording, but I'm melting here, so we got it going. But you know what? That's all right. In the land where it's usually wet and rainy, sunshine is always welcome.
Absolutely. And, I'm seeing the forecast for your area. You're having really unnatural heat wave that's going on up there.
Yeah, and we're wimps. We're not used to that. I go to the Hope Fest in Prescott, Arizona, with a couple of my co-hosts, and we land in Phoenix, and it's like I'm dying. And my buddy Marco lives in Phoenix. He's like, "This is great weather, man." And I'm like, "You people are nuts." So what are we doing? This is episode 5. So it's article 5, actually. Coming out of this book.
So we've made it all the way up to page 16 in 5 episodes, Monty.
Cracks me.
That's just kind of the way we are.
Yeah.
And the article we're going to cover tonight is called "Our Anonymity is Both Inspiration and Safety." And this comes from March 1946. Now, that's a long time ago. That really is early. That's early in Alcoholics Anonymous's history, really. I mean, it's in the first, certainly in the first 10 years of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure.
So really, this was all being built. And, the thing that it really amazes me is so many of these principles and so many of the things that Bill discusses, in these early articles are still very, very valid today.
Yeah.
So 80, 70 some years after the writing of these articles, they're still as valid today as they were when they were written. And much of the philosophy and much of the principles followed along into the experience in Alcoholics Anonymous that many people get, and 12-step fellowships that many people get. So I'm pretty excited to go through this. It really is going to be an experience. It's a large body of work.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
I hope that we can both hang in there for this.
Me too.
But anyway, so I'm gonna start reading. Our anonymity is both inspiration and safety.
All right.
Discussing the subject of anonymity in a previous Grapevine article, I tried to make the following points: that anonymity has for us AAs an immense spiritual significance, that the principle ought to be preserved as part of our vital tradition, that since we have as yet no sharply defined policy, there is confusion in some quarters as to what anonymity ought to mean, that we need, therefore, a perfectly clear tradition which all AAs would feel bound to respect. I also offered some suggestions which I hope might become, after further discussion, the basis of a national policy on anonymity. These suggestions were, I'm going to stop for a minute. He's building the structure of the traditions.
Yeah.
Right here and right now in March 1946, and he's giving us play-by-play, a play-by-play account of that. This is fascinating.
What fascinates me about him, and I know you've alluded to this before, is Bill's ability to see ahead around corners that we couldn't see.
He was intuitive. He was a visionary.
Yeah.
And yes, he knew we would blow ourselves up without sometimes he calls this the public relations policy is what he uses to describe the early version of the traditions, right? So you don't want to get confused, but he's now switching the language over to tradition, a vital tradition for the welfare of this fellowship, and this is really early on. I'm amazed. I'm amazed at how intuitive he was.
Yeah, me too.
So here are the suggestions that he is giving us. One, it should be the privilege of each AA to cloak himself with as much personal anonymity as he desires. His fellow AAs should respect his wishes and help guard whatever status he wants to assume. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this, and we're in alignment with this, Monty.
Yes.
I think good, good operational procedure of people in 12-step fellowships is, follows this today.
And do you think, Chris, that for the most part they do? For the most part,
some of the newer people who just haven't matured or gained enough experience are, they can they can not understand this, and they can bend and break it. And there's even some old timers who just don't care anymore about their anonymity. They just don't care anymore. They're sober like 40 years, and they don't feel like they're doing anything wrong. So there's like a whole spectrum of people in between that. But I think for the most part, people follow these principles.
Yeah.
And number two, conversely, the individual AA ought to respect the feelings of his local group about anonymity. If the group wishes to be less conspicuous in their locality than he does, he ought to go along with them until they change their views. This is something we don't talk about too much, but like the secret meeting.
Right.
I think they were still having the secret meetings in the 40s. Okay. We meet in church basements, and we have clubhouses now, and we don't really care about who sees us pulling into the parking lot like we used to. But each AA ought to respect the feeling of his local group. That goes to group autonomy. Each group is autonomous. That's a tradition that we'll follow, that he's not even talking about here, but he's intimating it, that each group can kind of run things the way they want to. And if a group wants to be a secret group, where you don't tell anybody where it is or whatever, you're supposed to respect the group in that wish. And
I think I'm thinking of a place that is up in our state's capital up here in Oregon, in Salem, that there's no labels, there's no decals on the door, there's nothing that says, there's no triangle with a circle around, there's nothing, right? everybody knows what it is by now. Everybody knows where it is, but they adhere very strongly to put no signage whatsoever out. And yet, the main one here in my hometown, there's this huge giant sign, Albany Group 1, with a big circle and triangle, and everybody knows that too. So there you go.
Yeah, so each group can do it the way they want to do it.
Yeah.
I kind of fall in the middle. They say that, AA is attraction rather than promotion. Well, you need something to be attracted to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I had 2 meetings that were meeting literally 2 blocks away from me at the top of my street that I didn't know about the whole time I was drinking myself to death.
Really?
I didn't know they were there. A circle and a triangle wouldn't have meant anything to me. So I think, I think sometimes more can be done. More can be done to attract, the people who might need this particular fellowship.
Yeah.
All right, number 3, with very rare exceptions, it ought to be a national policy that no member of Alcoholics Anonymous shall ever feel free to publish in connection with any AA activity his name or picture in media of public circulation. This would not, however, restrict the use of his name in other public activities, provided, of course, he does not disclose his AA membership. Monty, this is probably the first, besides the forward to the book Alcoholics Anonymous, this is probably the first time he's really laid this out. And you and I have discussed this multiple times, and we are in total agreement with it.
Yep,
no name, no full name, no picture in public media. And if you do go into public activities, you don't disclose your membership.
That's right.
In a 12-step organization, and that really is the heart of the public expression of this tradition.
Absolutely.
Number 4, if for some extraordinary reason a member thinks it desirable to drop his anonymity locally, he should do so only after consulting his own group. If, as an AA, he is to make a nationwide public appearance, the matter ought to be referred to the national headquarters. And which means you ain't getting permission.
Right, right.
What I mean?
Yeah, they're not going to put their stamp on that. No.
Yeah, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You can't get your group to agree on what kind of decaf to have. They're gonna be okay with a member running around, breaking their anonymity. It's just not gonna happen.
Not gonna happen.
If these suggestions or variations of them are to be adopted as a national policy, every AA will want to know more about our experience so far. He will surely wish to know how most of our older members are thinking on the subject of anonymity at the present time. It will be the purpose of this piece to bring everybody up to date on our collective experience. Now, I got to tell you, one thing I learned by reading Bill Schaberg's on the writing of the Big Book is Bill a lot of times claims collective experience when it's his experience.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Collectively, we put the Big Book together. No, collectively, you didn't put the Big Book together. It was you and a handful of people in a little office. So a lot of times he'll stretch the story out to make it look more in unity with, more collaborative, when it really isn't collaborative. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to read this. I'm going to give it an open mind, but I have a feeling he's going to be talking about his own experience more than anything else, because that's just what he does. He
does that in Two Wives. I mean, if nobody knew the history of that chapter, Two Wives, they would think that Lois wrote it. I mean, if you don't know what's going on, and I don't think he had a problem with that.
Listen, Monty, here's something really strange. Like Akron really didn't have a lot to do with the book Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's a lot of stories in the back of the first edition Big Book, and those stories have to do with members that were in Akron, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happened was a writer took these people to dinner one by one and asked them a bunch of questions about their history, and then went back to the hotel room and wrote their story up without them knowing about it. And that's what was published in the big book.
Oh boy. That's great.
So there's a and none of this is in conference approved.
No, of course not.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. It's all cleaned up there. But yeah, a lot of weird things went on. It takes nothing away from the power and the majesty and the transformative capability of this Alcoholics Anonymous message and literature. It just makes it more interesting to me.
It does. It actually helps me identify with Bill. I mean, when he basically comes out and alludes to the untruth that we find out later, that he actually, got his law degree. He didn't get his law degree. But I like it because I read that stuff and I go, God, I'm this guy. Identify with this guy.
So he's putting a book together and he wants 40 stories in the back, and the people in Akron think it's a giant boondoggle and don't want to have any part of it. So they send in a writer to take these people
That's
out
funny.
to lunch.
That is great.
Hey, he was not going to be stopped, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was on a mission from God.
That's great.
So first, I believe most of us would agree that the general idea of anonymity is sound because it encourages alcoholics and the families of alcoholics to approach us for help. Still fearful of being stigmatized, they regard our anonymity as an insurance their problems will be kept confidential, that the alcoholic skeleton in the family closet will not wander the streets. This really is the first time I've even thought about, this is how selfish and self-centered I am, Monty. This is the first time I've even thought that anonymity would be good for the rest of the family. I've never thought of that before. I've never thought about that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Wow. Second, the policy of anonymity is a protection to our cause. It prevents our founders or leaders, so-called, from becoming household names who might at any time get drunk and give AA a black eye. No one need say that couldn't happen here. It could. Third, almost every newspaper reporter who covers us complains at first of the difficulty of writing his story without names. But he quickly forgets this difficulty when he realizes that here is a group of people who care nothing for personal gain. Probably it is the first time in his life he's ever reported an organization which wants no personal publicity. Cynic though he may be, this obvious sincerity instantly transforms him into a friend of AA. Therefore, his piece is a friendly piece, never a routine job. It is enthusiastic writing because the reporter feels that way himself. People often ask how Alcoholics Anonymous has been able to secure such an incredible amount of excellent publicity. The answer seems to be that practically everyone who writes about us becomes an AA convert, sometimes a zealot. Is not our policy of anonymity mainly responsible for this phenomenon? Now, he's again broadening, this experience probably farther than it needs to. But the Jack Alexander article was exactly that. Jack Alexander was sent into Alcoholics Anonymous to find out what's the racket. They're meeting with the Rockefellers. What's the racket with these guys? And he went in there and all they did was say, hey, just come to the meetings. Just come to the meetings and listen. And he saw that, they were sincere. Yeah. These people were sincere, and he became a convert. So I'm sure Bill is talking a lot about the Jack Alexander article, but maybe there's some articles that I'm unaware of. After, I know there was a Liberty magazine article and a few others. But yeah, there really wasn't much bad press in the early days.
Chris, this makes me think of some things in the last 18 years that we've been doing Take 12 Radio. I've been hit with articles. People have sent me stuff talking about different contributors to Alcoholics Anonymous and their association with the Nazi Party and just all sorts of stuff, right? And it seems that whenever that stuff pops up, it seems to be short-lived. It doesn't seem to hold much water. It fades away. Whereas with many organizations, that's not the case. They get a black spot on their name. It sticks. And I think the reason for that is because God's in it and He protects it.
Yeah, the Alcoholics Anonymous policy is not fight back.
Right. Right.
If a reporter calls up central office and says, "Hey, man, this article, AA cult or cure. Man, this article, I was a prisoner of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a really bad article. You have any comment?" No comment.
No comment. Yeah.
No comment.
Yeah.
And that's the comment. No comment. And listen, there's a lot of stuff out there, especially with the Google machine.
Yeah.
If you want to find some ugly stuff about Alcoholics Anonymous, there's white papers, there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Sure.
And here's how I feel about all of that. There's been millions of members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Just like there's members of specific churches and bad things happen.
Yeah.
Within those congregations. Same thing with Alcoholics
Same
Anonymous.
thing.
We have millions of people. There are going to be some bad things that are going to happen within the confines of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Sure.
But for the most part, I find it a spiritually safe place.
Yeah.
I do. I find most people trying to live by higher principles.
Sure. Yeah.
And is there going to be the occasional scandal? You know what I mean? Yes. And you can't. How can you not expect that? I'll tell you where most of the bad press comes from, Monty, because I've read a lot of the books. So someone will show up in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And they'll be in 7 types of therapy, and they'll be on 14 types of medication, right? And they'll show up in AA, and Alcoholics Anonymous, they're going to try to change it. It doesn't seem to be, it's not modern. It's the language is sexist. Why don't we change this? Why don't we change that? They're 4 months sober, and they're trying to change things, and everybody shuts them down. Right?
Yeah.
No, thank you. You know what I mean?
Right.
and they just kind of patronize them a little bit, pat them on the head and say, keep coming. And they get a huge resentment and they leave, and then they write a book about it, about how it didn't work for them when they had no clue what it really was about to begin with. None of those people who've written those books ever did a 4-step inventory, ever did a 5th step, ever paid back all the money, established a relationship with God, and started taking other people through the steps. None of them did.
Right.
Because if anybody does Alcoholics Anonymous, they become a convert.
Yeah.
You can't help it but be, because it's cause and effect. You do those things, and they cause a spiritual awakening. They cause a change in attitude and outlook. They cause a personality change. And you're going to say, yeah, AA works, but you have to actually work it. Many people out there are crediting their failure to get better on the fact that all they did was attend some meetings. And it's not, you and I know it's not about the meetings.
Right.
You know what I mean? The meetings are about creating an environment whereby we can gain access to a pathway to go through the 12 steps and then to develop a life of service. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. Going to the closed-minded discussion meeting, talking about your day. Some people actually think, that's AA, and then it doesn't work for them. And then they tell everybody that AA doesn't work, when really what happened was, they didn't work AA. So that's what I've seen.
Do we need to take some responsibility for that, those AAs to some degree in maybe rejuvenating this whole idea of actually applying and implementing the principles of the 12 steps instead of just offering bad coffee in an hour and a half?
I believe so. I mean, I participate in recovery literature-based groups.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've been to just a regular discussion meeting in years. Where you just go in and just talk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a renaissance going on now that there's a lot of people that are, back to the book. Let's just call it back to the book,
Sure.
back to the principles.
Yeah.
And I think that's good for Alcoholics Anonymous. It may not increase the fellowship, Monty, because there are so many non-alcoholics that end up in AA.
In AA, yeah.
Who they're fine with a discussion meeting, but when you get them to, you get them to have to sit down and, put in a men's list where they got to pay back money, that's not something they're interested in. And so they're just going to kind of hang out in the meetings. And if everything shifted to the recovery end of the spectrum, we'd lose 60% of the fellowship. So I think we need everything. I think we need every type of meeting. I think we need every type of sponsor. I think we need every type of home group. I just do. We need that spectrum. But I'm really glad that it's easier to find now a solution-based big book group or, traditions group or three legacy group, however you want to call it. I'm really glad that it's easier to find those today than when you and I started to come around.
Yep, me too.
Fourth, why does the general public regard us so favorably? Is it simply because we are bringing recovery to lots of alcoholics? No, this can hardly be the whole story. However impressed he may be by our recoveries, John Q. Public is even more interested in our way of life. Weary of pressure selling, spectacular promotion, and shouting public characters, he is refreshed by our quietness, modesty, and anonymity. It well may be that he feels a great spiritual power is being generated on this account, that something new has come into his own life. If anonymity has already done these things for us, we surely ought to continue it as a national policy. So very valuable to us now, it may become an incalculable asset for the future. In a spiritual sense, anonymity amounts to the renunciation of personal prestige as an instrument of national policy. I am confident that we shall do well to preserve this powerful principle, that we should resolve never to let go of it. And really, Bill was the guy coming up with this. He'll say, we're sharing our combined experience. Bill was the guy who came up with this. Dr. Bob was not running around saying we need to be anonymous. Clarence Snyder was not running around saying we needed to be anonymous in the early days. As a matter of fact, many people couldn't have cared less about the traditions. Bill had to stomp the country. He had to go everywhere and talk about the traditions and ask, all the people who were in the districts and the areas in the country to please vote in the traditions. And out of respect for him, they did. But there wasn't a huge amount of focus on it. He was the guy focusing on this stuff.
Yeah.
And we can really be grateful for that.
Yeah. Amen. And there's where his salesmanship comes in. He had to sell it. Yeah.
He was a couple of things. He was a good salesman, and he was a good picker of stock too. I mean, he for a long time he had great instinct in picking the stocks in the stock market. Mm-hmm. There was something awake about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, what about its application? Since we advertise anonymity to every newcomer, we ought, of course, to preserve a new member's anonymity so long as he wishes it preserved. Because when he reads our when he read our publicity and came to us, we contracted to do exactly that. And even if he wants to come in under an assumed name, we should assure him he can. If he wishes us to refrain from discussing his case with anyone, even other AA members, we ought to respect that wish too. While most newcomers do not care a rap about who knows about their alcoholism, there are others who care very much. Let us guard them in every way until they get over that feeling. And that was talked about early on in the meetings that I was going to. It really was. Then comes the problem of the newcomer who wishes to drop his anonymity too fast. He rushes to all his friends and with the glad news of AA. If his group does not caution him, he may rush to a newspaper office or a microphone to tell the wide world all about himself. He is likely to tell everyone the innermost details of his personal life, soon to find in that respect he has altogether too much publicity. We ought to suggest to him that he take things easy, that he first get on his own feet before talking about AA to all and sundry, that no one thinks of publicizing AA without being sure of the approval of his own group. Then there's the problem of group anonymity. Like the individual, it is probable that the group ought to feel its way along cautiously until it gains strength and experience. There should not be too much haste to bring in outsiders or to set up public meetings. Yet this early conservatism can be overdone. Some groups go on year after year shunning all publicity or any meetings except those for alcoholics only. Such groups are apt to grow slowly. They become stale because they're not taking in fresh blood fast enough. In their anxiety to maintain secrecy, they forget their obligation to other alcoholics in their communities who've not heard that AA has come to town. But this unreasonable caution eventually breaks down. Little by little, some meetings are open to families and close friends. Clergy and doctors may now and then be invited. Finally, the group enlists the aid of a local newspaper. You know, so he's really pushing for open meetings here.
Yes.
He's saying a closed AA meeting is not necessarily a bad thing, but they'll understand after a period of time, they'll mature out of that notion.
Yeah.
and they'll open it up. That's what he's saying.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. In most places, but not all, it is customary for AAs to use their own names when speaking before public or semi-public gatherings. This is done to impress audiences that we no longer fear the stigma of alcoholism. If, however, newspaper reporters are present, they are earnestly requested not to use the names of any alcoholic speakers on the program. This preserves the principle of anonymity so far as the general public is concerned, and at the same time represents us as a group of alcoholics who no longer fear to let our friends know that we have been very sick people. That's an interesting paragraph there. They're putting the onus on the newspaper or the form of media to please keep it. So they'll use their full name, but if a reporter is there, they'll go up and say, "Please don't put my last name in." You know, maybe you could trust reporters back in those days, Monty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not sure you could trust the media today to hold with a policy of an organization they don't belong to. So, but this is very interesting.
Yeah, and so let me just share real quickly. Years ago, when I was in a service position with a specific 12-step fellowship, I had gotten an interview from a local newspaper about something that was unrelated to that altogether. But I kind of knew some of the people at the paper. They knew me, and I made it very clear that I did not want them to use my last name. Well, they did not listen to me. They used my last name, and even though the article was not about that particular organization in any way, shape, or form, my phone started ringing off the wall, and I was getting my butt chewed. I mean, it was a hard lesson to learn. Yeah, it was just and see, the article had nothing to do with that fellowship or any 12-step fellowship. It was a completely separate thing, and yet that's where it fell. So. You got to be careful. My butt still hurts from that conversation.
You know what? It wasn't your intent.
No, it wasn't.
You know what I mean? It certainly wasn't your intent. And And these reporters don't know. What Alcoholics Anonymous used to do is they used to send every single newspaper, every single radio station, once a year, their tradition of anonymity. Their statement of anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
And please respect this if someone breaks their anonymity as a member of our fellowship. So
right.
So anyway,
yeah.
All right, it says, in practice, then, the principle of anonymity seems to come down to this. With one very important exception, the question of how far each individual group shall go in dropping anonymity is left strictly to the individual group concerned. The exception is that all groups or individuals, when writing or speaking for publications as members of Alcoholics Anonymous, feel bound never to disclose their true names, except for very rare cases. It is at this point of publication, nearly all of us feel that we should draw the anonymity line. We ought not disclose ourselves to the general public. And, he's not saying TV here. I don't know that there was TV in 1946. He's not really talking too much about radio. He's really talking about publications.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular tradition stretched out, and Alcoholics Anonymous would like you to believe it has to do with the internet also, but I've not seen anything that has changed the wording of the tradition. You know what I mean?
Now I've seen
press, radio, and film.
Press radio and film.
Press radio and film. Right?
Yeah. Now I have seen in an IP pamphlet that there was added the word, including internet, in an IP pamphlet, but it wasn't written in the tradition. It was a paragraph. In addition,
my question would always be, who put that in?
Yeah.
Who added that line?
Right.
And a lot of times when you ask them, they won't tell you.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a conference approved change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I get wound up with some of the people who try to change all this stuff. Do it right. Get 3/4 of the groups to agree on a tradition change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there you go. Work. Yeah, trust the process. Yeah.
To get it done, if you want it done. Don't just tag it on the end of a sentence. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Anyway, I don't judge. I need for you to know that, Monty. In our whole history, not more than a handful of AAs have ever dropped their anonymity so far as the general public is concerned. Some of these instances have been accidental. A few have been quite unnecessary, and one or two are apparently justified. Of course, there must be few policies about which cannot sometimes, in the general interest, be suspended. Yet any who would drop their anonymity must reflect that they may set a precedent which could eventually destroy a valuable principle. The exceptions will have to be few, far between, and most carefully considered. We must never let any immediate advantage shake us in our determination to hang on to such a really vital tradition. I only know of one time where there was permission given for a picture and a last name, and that was when Bill Wilson died. His obituary carried his full name and his picture, and I think that was purposeful.
And was that left?
I do. I think Alcoholics Anonymous, gave a green light to that. However that might have looked.
Was that primarily left up to his family?
What's that?
Was that primarily left up to his family? I know that's what some of the material says now, that we refer to the family when a person passes on.
Yeah, I mean, his family was really only Lois, who was a 12-step member. You know,
right.
I don't think anybody else was left alive. He might have had a sister that was alive, but I doubt it.
Okay.
So it would have been all on Lois, who was very much, understood everything there is to know about AA. So I really think the green light was given for that one. But I don't know of any other times where AA said, sure, you can break your anonymity, and this sounds like a very good reason. You're running for president, or something.
Yeah.
No, they want you to shut up. about
Right,
it because of the black eye syndrome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't know that you're going to be sober this time next year.
That's right.
And that's all we need is somebody who is identified with Alcoholics Anonymous, who is now identified as really screwing up in a bad way. You know what I mean? And there's been a bunch of celebrities who have done that, and recently, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And really made a mess out of not only their situation but ours. Great modesty and humility are needed by every AA for his own permanent recovery, and I think that's true.
Sure.
If these virtues are such vital needs to the individual, so must they be to AA as a whole. This principle of anonymity before the general public can, if we take it seriously enough, guarantee the Alcoholics Anonymous movement these sterling attributes forever. Our public relations policy should mainly rest upon the principle of attraction and seldom, if ever, upon promotion. That's the first writing of Attraction, Not Promotion, too, I believe, 1946.
Wow. So let me ask what your thoughts are on social media. I mean, now it's nothing new. Now it's been going on for quite a while, but I remember when groups like Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. There was a group called Alcoholics Victorious. I think it was a faith-based group. Started showing up on social media. The first time I ever saw it was back in the days of MySpace. That was before Facebook. And man, there was a lot of eyebrows being raised and a lot of, people getting hot under the collar about it. And, and then I read some material on Facebook where there was I don't know who wrote this, but there was an actual disclaimer that stated that this is an official Alcoholics Anonymous online group. And we adhere to the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, blah, 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 blah. And as I kind of followed that page, I noticed that they were very strict and very careful to make sure that whatever was posted, it was policed really well, and then I've seen others where not so much. What do you think of the social media influence?
I don't know that it's controllable. I don't know that putting a policy together is going to ensure that anybody follows it. I mean, hopefully people have a good inner sense of what is appropriate to put out there and what is not appropriate to put out there on their Facebook or their Instagram or whatever,
Yeah.
But listen, a lot of traditions have been broken and it's become traditional to break them. I'll give you, for instance, a men's meeting or a woman's meeting.
Yes. Right.
Or a gay person's meeting or whatever. That's a break in tradition. I don't care what you say. That's a break in tradition. But it's become okay because it's so valuable to the people who participate in it. I think kind of the same way with the internet, and the Zoom meetings and the Facebook pages and all the stuff that you see out there. Everyone's, and we sometimes self-police. Like if something is really, off base. There was one Zoom group, Monty, that was recording your picture. They were recording your picture while you were speaking on Zoom.
Oh wow!
And then putting it on YouTube without telling you.
Oh my goodness!
And yeah, and they let me tell you, that didn't last very long. There were some people who let them know that that's really not something that you do.
Right.
And so that that's kind of changed. But I've got to tell you, the thing that I don't like is when policies come out of the central office or the intergroup or whatever. When policies come out and you will now do this, you can't say that to me without showing me all the backup information, all the conference notes, all the votes that have taken place. Because there are no leaders, there are trusted servants, and the groups are the decision makers in this. So show me how all the groups voted. Don't just come out and say, you need to follow anonymity on Facebook. Don't say that without showing me all of the due diligence that we're supposed to go through as part of our service structure, all the concepts that need to be followed and everything. And a lot of times you're not gonna have it. And Monty, this is the end of the show, so anybody that's hung in there long enough, they're gonna hear me I'm not critical very often, but I'm going to be critical right now.
Okay.
There are knuckleheads in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll just give you two real quick examples. One of them was when Zoom hit. There was somebody who was working for the New York intergroup who called up Zoom and said, "Hey, we need to have meetings, blah, 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 yeah, right?" And so the Zoom people said, "Okay, well, this is what it costs for a Zoom meeting." That individual thought, this is what it costs for all Zoom meetings. So she signed a contract, and next month the bills for $60,000 started to come in to intergroup because they made an announcement that if you want a Zoom ID, you can get it through New York Intergroup.
Wow.
Please contact New York Intergroup, for a code that will allow you to get a Zoom ID and password meeting, so you can have a meeting. And
wow.
All of a sudden the bills start coming in to Intergroup, and they're like, "What the hell did you do?" And she goes, "I must have misunderstood the contract. I think I'll resign."
Oh my gosh.
So that's one example. Another example is some people. It's some very influential levels in Alcoholics Anonymous. The original manuscript.
Yes.
So Hazelden has a facsimile copy that you can
right.
buy. And what it is it's the original manuscript with all Bill's handwriting and everything in it, right? As he was going from the original manuscript to the final draft of the big book. It's an important historical document, but we've got it reproduced. Well, some people in Alcoholics Anonymous, a handful of people at the central office there on Riverside Drive, hear that original manuscript is going to be put up for auction in New York City. Now, they have a letter from the guy who wrote Living Sober, for God's sake, back around 1970 or something.
Yeah.
This guy was in possession. He was a good friend of Lois Wilson. So he was in possession of this original manuscript, and he wrote a letter saying, when I die, I'm gonna will this to the archives. But he didn't do that. It ended up in private hands, and it's been moving through private hands for a long time. It ended up in the private hands of somebody down in Texas. And so, it was time for him to sell it. He bought it for like $2 million, and, its value was maybe $3 million. Maybe he was trying to make $1 million on it. So he's going to put it for auction at Christie's. New York hears it's going to be in New York. The New York central office hears it's going to be in New York, and they sue. The minute it gets there, they sue for possession of it, because they've got this letter that this guy wrote back in 1970 saying he was gonna will it to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, the thing blew up like nobody's business. The guy in Texas was not to be fooled around with. So, and they had really no case. So they spent millions of dollars on attorneys suing for this original manuscript, Monty.
Wow.
Now, every one of those millions of dollars comes from $1 that somebody puts in a basket.
In the basket, yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And listen, they lost the suit, and not only did they lose the suit, they had to pay the Texas guys attorney's fees.
Wow.
And
what
listen,
a
we're
blunder.
not supposed to engage in public controversy. We're not supposed to sue anybody. You know what I mean? That's not part of our principles. And man, did we learn a lesson. Now, I don't think we learned it well enough because there was no policy changes. There was no policies or procedures changed to the best of my knowledge. In the central office, nobody made new rules and regulations about who could do what, at the higher levels of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I would have expected that if it was a company, and a company, shot themselves in the foot at that kind of level. First of all, people would have been fired. Second of all, there would have been all kinds of different policies and procedures put together. There would have been an action plan. There would have been an investigation. How did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
What weaknesses in our organization allowed this to happen? None of that was done in New York, not to my knowledge.
Wow.
So listen, we're still drunks. We're still drunks, and we're still very, very imperfect people. And again, I'm going to say that makes me love this organization more
Even
than
more.
if it was run like IBM. You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, that's a great way to close out the show this week. I love it. I absolutely love it. We are not a reservoir of mental wellness. What a gift, really. Stories like this and experiences like this, and the way that our Creator can turn things upside down on its head, and good could come out of it is beyond me. But thank God He does. Chris, thank you so much for another great episode on walking through the language of the heart, my friend.
That's fun.
Absolutely. I want the listeners to know that you can go back. We have a dedicated webpage just for these episodes. If you visit take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner, there you will find Walking Through the Language of the Heart, and you can go back to the first 4 episodes in this one, and we'll keep adding to that every week until we're done. It'll probably be a very long page, but it'll be there for you for fun and for free. Feel free to download these shows. We've made them accessible to you at no charge. We ask that you go ahead and feel free to share them. The only thing we ask is you don't use them for any kind of financial gain whatsoever. These are given as a gift to you from Take 12 Recovery Radio, myself and Chris. All right, my friend. Well, God bless you, buddy.
All right. We'll see you next week.
Okay, see you next week. Folks, until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.